My question is from Acts chapter 2.
Acts chapter 2.
Where it's talking about that the Holy Spirit gave the disciples utterance. Now, was that where it says other tongues?
Yes.
Is that referring to like different languages that they didn't already speak? So like in other words, like was this a miracle from the Holy Spirit that he gave the disciples the ability to speak these languages that they didn't know how to speak?
Well, as a matter of fact, that's what we're told at the beginning in verse 6. When this sound occurred, the crowd came together and were bewildered because each of them was hearing them speak in his own what? Language. See, here's part of the problem with translation. In 1611, the word tongue was the word for language. The tongue of the Spaniard, the tongue of the French. So the King James said tongues are tongues, speaking in tongues. Meant it languages, that's all. Now the King James added a word, unknown, put it in italics. So you ended up with unknown tongues. Now you fast forward the tape, you come to the Azusa Street revival in the early part of the 20th century and the nutcases over there in Azusa. And they were real royal nutcases. One claimed he was a reincarnation of the prophet Elijah. That just gives you a sampling of the nutcases of the Azusa Street revival. 3 of them were pedophiles. But anyway, they read unknown tongues. Yes, we must speak in unknown tongue. Takaluma chukalama, ula kachala malala chula, hula 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 hula. And they made it, ooh. Do you speak in an unknown tongue in tongues? Now, if it would have been translated, languages, and would you look, it lists them? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus. These are languages. Hello, German, French, Chinese. But because the King James said unknown tongues, and we no longer use the word tongue, it became what I call the religio linguistica. It became a religious vocabulary that carried its own meaning that had nothing to do with the Bible. Now, the miracle was of 2 things. The debate is this: how many people were preaching? That's the first debate. Now, if you look, it says the day of Pentecost happened, and there were, as a matter of fact, 120 people in the upper room. Were there not? Who was there? If you look in chapter 1, they returned to Jerusalem. They entered the city. Verse 13, they went to the upper room. Who all was there? Well, you read Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Simon the Zealot, Judas. Oh, there was also women, Mary the mother of Jesus, with his brothers, you see. And verse 15, Peter stood up. There was a gathering about how many persons up in that upper room? What does it say? 120. 120. Question: how many people were preaching and how many people were baptizing? Now this answers the question later on when it says, look at all these thousands of people that were saved and then need to be baptized, 3,000, verse 41 of chapter 2. How did 11, because Judas was dead, how did 11 people baptize 3? What about 120 people baptizing people? What about 120 people preaching the gospel? Well, we can't have that. Why not? Well, there might be women. Well, If you look in chapter 2, when Peter's explaining what's going on, verse 17, I will pour my Spirit on all of humanity, and your sons and who else? Your daughters will what? So all the women haters, I get these pastors. You would never allow a woman to speak from the pulpit, would you? I said, I'd put Corrie ten Boom in my pulpit so fast her hair would straighten out. I'd put Edith Schaefer in here. Who do you think was preaching all this stuff? All 120 were filled with the Spirit and were that's why he had to explain. Sons, daughters, old men, everybody was involved. Preaching the word. So that was the first. The second was the miracle that they were speaking in different languages, or the miracle that the people were hearing. I think it was the speaking, because later on, when this is justified, I will speak in foreign languages. So it was the ability to communicate the gospel in languages that you never formally studied, because this crowd then went out and spread the gospel through the known Roman world. Paul didn't start the church at Rome. It was part of the ripple effect of Pentecost. We would have never had Pentecostalism except for that unknown tongue with the word unknown, not in the Greek, and the word tongue really meant language. We wouldn't have had that whole sort of thing. So it's really important that you understand here it is clearly languages.
So where it says with other tongues, that means with
Other
unknown languages.
Yeah, they're listed, and they give you the names of them. The Parthians, the Medes, the Elamites. These are exactly it. Visitors from Rome, Cretans, even the Arabs got the gospel. We heard them in our own language, see, tongues, speaking of the mighty deeds of God.
So that Greek word for other is not like the other of a different kind, though, right? That is, because this is a different
Means
word.
different ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
different
Thank you.
ones. Okay.